Fellow Toastmasters and welcome guest. As I reflect on my very first path in the New Pathways program, I have to say there were some ups and downs, some challenges, and certainly, fortunately, some successes. Now, the very first challenge I had with the Pathway program was the program. I loved the old program. I thought it was very clear, concise, simple, easy. You had your your um your information in Word and paper. I love paper. And then they were going to shift to this whole new program, revamp it, and put it online. I am not a techie person, so I resisted to the very last moment. There was about a 2-year time frame where you could finish off the old program and move into the new one. And I waited to the very last minute before they closed the door, and I had to go forward in Pathways whether I liked it or not. And I'll be honest, I not only resisted it, I wondered if I was even going to continue in Toastmasters because I was very frustrated. But because I love Toastmasters and have felt that it has really helped me in my life and feeling better about myself, being more confident, and learning skills that I would not have learned without Toastmasters, I trudged forward on my experience. And fortunately, Toastmasters District 10 did offer training on how to access the Pathways program and get started, which again I resisted, but I kept trudging forward. And one of the first things you did was to or fill out a questionnaire, which would help gear you towards picking the perfect pathway for what your goals were. I did that, and I eventually decided on the pathway called Presentation Mastery, and I felt that that would probably give me the best direction for the goals that I had. Now, every single path has 5 levels. Now, the first level in all paths are exactly the same, and I'll talk about that shortly. In the second and third level, there are many speeches, and usually a couple of the speeches in that section are geared towards your specific path. And then when you move on to 4 and 5, it's more of a leadership and bigger projects. So I'll start at the beginning, doing an icebreaker. Well, I've been in Toastmasters for, I believe, about 14 years, and I've given a couple different icebreaker speeches. And coming up with a new way to present myself to a club that already knows me was quite a challenge. But I used my creativity and finally came up with a way to present myself in yet another way in hopes to have people understand me better. Then you had to give a speech and then repeat it, which actually I think is an absolutely fabulous idea, especially for beginning speakers. But because it gives them a chance to give the speech and then take the evaluation and then present it again, which makes people feel like they've accomplished something and they feel good about themselves. But I think with somebody that's been through the program over and over, that's not really quite as effective. But I did it anyways. Then there was the reference speech, which I always think is a really great speech because I got to pick a topic that I was unfamiliar with, do research, and then present it as a speech. And I chose a speech on the history of toilet paper and managed to make it a humorous speech as I went through. And again, level 2 and 3, you got to do lots of speeches. And that's my favorite part of doing Toastmasters. I love the creative aspect of taking an idea or a theme and pulling ideas that pop up in my mind and then practicing and presenting the speech. And in these 2 levels, they had the choice of what you might want to work on, which was similar to the old program in that some of them are using voice variety, some are using gestures, some doing research, some using props and inspiring your audience. So it was easy to pick themes that I could fit in with the speeches that I chose to give. Now, when you move into level 4, as I mentioned, it was much more in the line of leadership as well as different projects to be done. And you had to pick again from a couple of suggestions or ideas, which I thought was very helpful because it wasn't very completely rigid. There were choices to be made. And because of our wonderful experience with COVID, I chose doing a Zoom meeting. Some of the other possibilities were to do a podcast or to do a blog. But the Zoom meeting usage worked out quite nicely under the circumstances. And once again, Toastmasters came forth and provided training so people understood how to run Zoom meetings because they knew without Zoom, Toastmasters population was going to drop, probably would have closed Toastmasters. And as we know, it's been a challenge for all of us. And yet at the same time, if it hadn't been for Zoom, we would not have been able to continue with our meetings. And I don't think we even missed a single meeting, maybe one, but we just kept trudging away. And at this point, besides forgetting to do our mute or whatnot, we are doing an excellent job. And it's been certainly a learning, training, pushing me forward in ways that I probably never would have gone forward because I had heard the word Zoom before, but I had no idea what it was. And a week later, I was giving another meeting at a different group I'm involved in with some 20 people just like that. So it was almost magical and certainly quite valuable in my life. And I think the idea of having experiences that we learn in Toastmasters and then be able to put them into practice in our real life is quite beneficial as well. As one of my speeches, I did a humorous speech, which I then competed as a representative from our club at the area and district level. And I love to challenge myself to step forward in new venues and have different experiences that, again, constantly develop my speaking abilities. Now, in level 5, level 4, another project was to choose from a variety of items, and the one I chose was leading your volunteer organizations, which I use my Toastmaster leadership as an officer, of which I had to send out evaluations to some of the members who did an evaluation of me. And I thought that was a really beautiful experience because I got to feel or get the feedback from my fellow peers. And I actually got to see how far I've come. I think sometimes as we're working on projects, we just go to the next step and the next step and the next step, and sometimes don't look back and evaluate and see how far we've come along the journey. So it was really heartwarming to get the feedback and encouragement from my peers and see how much progress I have made in leadership, because initially I really wasn't all that involved in the leadership concept, and yet because I wanted to work towards my DTM, I see the effects of having chosen that and the value in not just Toastmasters, but again in my life. And one of the speeches I had to give was a speech where I had to prepare a regular 5 to 7 minute speech. And then different people in the audience were picked, unknown to me who they were going to be, and they were supposed to interrupt me as I was giving my speech. And I have to say, I was rather apprehensive of going into this speech because I didn't know if I was going to be able to stay on track with my speech every time somebody interrupted me. But I actually found it to be quite a helpful speech in the regard that in daily life experiences or in our Toastmaster meeting, sometimes somebody comes on the PA system, somebody drops something, a phone rings, or there's some type of interruption. So I found it actually quite valuable as a way for me to learn to stay in composure and learn how to perhaps present a response to something or someone that would interrupt a meeting in a way that was not disruptive to the speech, but kept it going along that way. Now, in project or level number 5, one of the projects in this particular presentation mastery was to prepare to speak professionally. And I was asked to give a speech at one of the workshops at Toastmasters. So it was a wonderful opportunity to fit this particular speech into that project. And this was to be an 18 to 20-minute speech. And as we know, in most of our speeches, it is a 5 to 7 minute speech. So to challenge myself to an 18 to 20-minute speech took a lot more preparation and time and commitment. And then to actually present the speech in the venue of, rather than maybe 10 to 15 people in a room of 150 people. But I felt that because of all my work with Toastmasters, I was able to do that without a lot of terror or anxiety. And it was just a bigger room with more people, but I just used my Toastmaster qualities and practice to fill that project, and it worked out beautifully. So, all in all, yes, there were ups and downs, there were challenges, but certainly I have learned and grown in so many ways, stepping forward in my process. And as they say, the proof is in the pudding, and the results have been amazing. So, anyone out there that's working on your path, I encourage you to keep taking those steps, and perhaps one day you'll be giving this speech to your peers. Mr. Toastmaster.